I think we are live. I'm not sure, man. 1, 2, 1, 2. Mic check. System check. Looks like we have one on. And hey, folks, if you can see me, I know I have one on. I had an issue a second ago. Sorry for the delay. 7:35. Sometimes my StreamYard setup doesn't work as effectively as it's supposed to. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Looks like we look good. Hey, I hope you can hear and see me okay. Hear and sound me okay. Hear and see me okay. I had an issue where I had a super echo for a second there, and I had to pop out of the stream and back into the stream. Let's do a little bit of a camera adjustment right there. Okay. All right, everybody looking good this morning. All right. Hey, John Greenman. Good morning, sir. Will, DDC for life absolutely looks okay here. Sound check is good. Good morning, Dan. We have about 29 people on. Connor, hey, good morning, Connor. How are you? From Michigan. Hey, there's Jared in Montana. How are you? Oh my gosh, Chuck number 213. That's a low coin number, man. Eric Mejia, good morning, sir. How are you? I hope you're safe out there, man. Hope things are going well. So, all right, folks, we are jumping on right now. Of course, I'll do my normal introduction. We'll do a safety briefing as well. You can see that I'm joined by my buddy Bob here because I want to talk to you about close quarter shooting positions. And I'm going to talk primarily about the defensive handgun distance considerations and close quarter shooting positions that oftentimes we may see or think or talk about. I'm going to talk about the extended position from the compressed position, which I call the high ready, to the extreme close quarter position, the ECQC position, or the high thumb pectoral index position, maybe as you might hear from Craig Douglas or AKA South Narc or Cecil Birch or Mike Brown or some of these really, really outstanding close quarter instructors. Brandon Bennett, who I haven't seen for a long time. Brandon, if you ever see this on Facebook, hi, how are you? But the point is, we're going to talk about that now. As always, I'm going to do my safety brief. And while I'm doing my safety brief, and for those of you that are old school and been with me long times, probably years now from the original DDC, I would love it if you just take 1 second, click the share button, share it to a couple groups on Facebook or whatever else, send a couple texts, tell folks, hey, we're getting online right now. We're trying to boost the numbers up and get a lot of people watching me and go from there. So number one, safety rules apply. If you are going to handle a firearm and practice these close quarter shooting positions with me this morning, I need to make sure that you are pretty please in a position where you have an unloaded firearm. Now, I have several firearms I'm going to be using. This is one of my Wilson Combat SFX9s, solid frame. I've got an unloaded and clear chamber on that particular firearm. I also have, this is a beautiful thing. This is actually a variant of that gun, but this is a different model. This guy is unloaded and clear as well. Got 2 guns with optics on them. Just wanted to show you the difference between the optics and the close quarter positions. So 2 manual safety 1911 systems. And the manual safeties here, this is the reason I brought these guns, because I want to talk about manual safeties and manipulating manual safeties in close quarter shooting position. So just be aware of that. I also, and by the way, the show sponsor today is actually Coolfire. So I've got this really cool M&P shield. Whoa, what is that? That is the Coolfire conversion kit for a small shield. By the way, this shield is famous. This shield has been on probably 10 different episodes of The Best Defense. If you watch the old Best Defense with Mr. Janich and I, you probably see either me being the bad guy or Janich being the bad guy. And this is the gun we use to shoot people with. Of course, with the Coolfire conversion kit, I can pull the trigger. Now, if you're not familiar with what a Coolfire trainer is, I know most of you probably are. I simply replace the barrel and the recoil spring in the shield. I can take some compressed CO2 like this, and I can feel this little barrel up like this. Boom, there's a feel, and I've got felt recoil. So I can practice multiple shots and stuff like that. I'm going to utilize this to show you that thumb position when we're talking about shooting from a close quarter shooting position. And that's why I have that. So once again, you can check them out at coolfiretrainer.com. All the sponsors, by the way, you can go to my website and find the sponsors, or you can go to our podcast website, AmericanWarriorShow.com. Yes, I have a podcast if you didn't know this. Okay, safety rules. 4 primary safety rules apply. All guns are always loaded, muzzle direction, safe backstop, and beyond. Of course, trigger finger position. When we're talking about trigger finger position today, that will be unique from the perspective of shooting from a close quarter position, because we always talk about little, aiming sayings, acronyms, or slogans, see what you need to see, and all these things. But you're going to realize that when you're shooting from a close quarter shooting position, we don't ever really aim the handgun in a traditional manner, but the handgun is still aimed to an extent. It's indexed and it's aimed, and we know where it's pointed. So be aware of that as well. Now, if you're in an area where you're going to be utilizing your gun, your dry firing or your cool firing or whatever else, safe backstop, folks. This wall leads to outside to a tree line and a bunch of rocks out there. So I have a safe backstop. This is, by the way, my new office. So if you don't have a safe backstop, if you got a kid's bedroom right there, maybe like I do, please don't dry fire in that direction. So all safety rules apply. If you're not willing to follow the safety rules, I got to ask you to go somewhere else this morning. Right? That's what my attorney might tell you. We have a bunch of people on. Hey, Linda from Fort Worth, Girl in the Gun. Good morning. Hey, Linda, get the rest of those ladies on this morning, because this close quarter discussion is going to be really important for you as well. And here's the deal. When I'm talking about close quarter shooting position, if you are in a home and you end up with that bump in the night, and then you make the decision to leave that area, or maybe you end up in a parking garage, or maybe you end up in a mall and things go south and you're trying to get to your vehicle, right? As humans, we're almost always interacting in close positions. We're almost always close enough where someone else can touch us, right? Hey, Bob, I'm sorry, man. Bob is getting some sun in his eyes. Let me actually move the curtain just a hair. There we go, Bob. How's that? There we go. You're welcome, man. But we're almost always interacting as humans in close situations where I can put my hands on them and they can put their hands on me. So if you don't understand some of these close positions, how to integrate or go from maybe an extended type search position to a compressed position where I would search from, I'll talk about that, to even a closer quarter position, you might be missing out, right? And Bob knows that, hey, if he can get his hands on my gun, he's going to take my gun. Or at a minimum, he's going to foul up the process of me trying to defend myself. And we don't want that to happen. By the way, good morning, Akeen. I see you. Number 2441 from Missouri. Good morning. Hey, Robert Gayhart. Nice to see you, brother. Number 1401 from Northern Kentucky. Hey, Ronald RZG. Good morning. Gilly's on. Will, hey, from Montana. Man, we had a lot of people on. German from Argentina again. German, I think you've been on a couple times. Nice to join us again. Thank you so much. And by the way, good morning to the IDPA shooters that are on. I am on the IDPA Facebook page. I am on the Shooting Performance Facebook page. And of course, the American Warrior Study Facebook page. If you want to know more about getting your challenge coin, I put that in the description when I started. So let's talk about this real quick. So in terms of close quarter position, so I want to talk to you just a little bit about distance management. By the way, sound check is okay up here. I know that. How is my sound back here? Someone give me a thumbs up or type sound is good back here. So I know I can teach from this distance and you all can hear me okay. Because I have a lot to talk about. And this distance is important to me in terms of actually being able to position Bob and move Bob around. By the way, I got to get Bob situated just a little bit better there. Because we've got to talk about distance management. If we're talking about close quarter shooting position, so we got to talk about distance management. So when I'm talking about distance management, right? Let's paint a theoretical situation in your mind. And by the way, it looks like everybody's giving me a thumbs up. So good, you can hear me from back there. Hey, Jared, no, but Jared has a good question, by the way. Does shooting Bob tear up the internal support? No, not really. Shooting Bob, which I have a Bob, I've shot a bunch. The pass-through shots, for example, if you're shooting these low shots in the groin or pelvic area with Bob, they will pass through that supporting beam or pole that goes up to the center of Bob. But they will just put little teeny tiny pinholes in it. Now, if you tip that over, it might leak, because right now you can kind of see I've got some water in Bob's base. I actually had to empty the water out of the base to move him in here because it's really heavy. So when I get him back outside to my outside gym area, I'll fill the base back up. But no, you can shoot Bob. Matter of fact, Century hired me many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, to help them do a couple close quarter shooting videos, and we actually shot Bob a bunch, by the way. Okay. Okay, so let's get into this. So let's talk about distance management. So when I'm talking about distance management, you know, I'm talking about, and I'm going to give you a visual with the SIRT pistol, by the way. So you could probably see the laser on Bob, right? Give you a little bit more of an angle here, right? I'm talking about a circumstance where we understand that having the handgun extended at this distance. So if I'm covering Bob, I find Bob in my house, right? I have that bump in the night. I hear a big noise. I grab my defensive handgun. I'm going to make sure my kids are safe, you know, whatever's going on. And I'm not saying that's the right answer, by the way. I'm saying that if you hear that bump in the night, you're oftentimes going to be much safer if you were to go and barricade yourself in some sort of a safe room, call the police, et cetera, et cetera. I know that's the standard line, but to be very honest with you, I don't think many of you are actually going to do that because you have kids, you have family members, you have a property or a piece of land that you need to go ahead and check out and make sure it's safe. But that's the smartest answer in the case where you're searching. And I'm moving around and I encounter Bob. Bob is in my house. And I don't know Bobby, and Bob is not supposed to be in my house. This is what I call distance management in an improper way. So if I'm going to point the gun at Bob, right, I'm in a situation right now where if Bob had arms, and I know Bob doesn't have arms, but if Bob had arms, Bob could simply reach out and grab my firearm. So here's rule number one in terms of distance management. Anytime you're going to have the handgun fully extended, you have to be at a distance where extending the handgun will not offer it to a grab. So that distance is a distance where if someone takes their arm and reaches and steps at the same time, they can't grab your gun, right? To be honest with you, in this office, it's very difficult for me to actually get that distance. I suppose maybe back here, this might be an appropriate distance. This would not be an appropriate distance because Bob could simply turn and step and grab my gun. This certainly would not be an appropriate distance. And what I found is in some of the simulated situations we've done, people have a habit under stress, even after they fired simunition type shots or simulated shots, of they fire a couple shots, boom, boom, and then they get really close and they try to cover the person on the ground at this distance. So if you can imagine Bob laying on the ground because he's been shot, the habit I see is people will run right up and extend the handgun, and they'll keep pointing the handgun, and they'll be very close. And what we often used to do is have the role player simply reach up and grab the handgun, and now that person is once again tied up in what we call the fouled up tangle, by the way. And hey, by the way, we got 85 people on. Man, we don't know. Last week we had like 155. So if you were watching me right now, like Mr. Oscar from Elgin, Texas. Good morning, Oscar, number 1979. I love all the folks that type in their coin number. I love that. John Shriver, longtime coin number, 1919. That's actually a cool number. Jay Fujimoto, number 188. I think Jay has the lowest coin number on that I've seen here, potentially, maybe. That's pretty low, actually, Jay, with 188. That's awesome. Hey, but if you haven't shared this, do me a favor and share this as we continue to talk. So the first one we talked about was distance management, understanding that I can only extend my handgun, or I should only extend my handgun if I am more than that one step reaching distance away from the opponent. So if I am closer than the one step reach distance from whoever I'm dealing with, I should not be extending the handgun. So you may say, well, Mike, if you're not going to extend the handgun, what are you going to do with it? And for me, I'm going to take the handgun and I'm going to compress it all the way back to my body. Now, you may see, and by the way, I call this the high ready position or the close quarter position. This is also a position that way back in the day when I used to run the Air Marshal Firearms Training Program, we did a lot of our scanning from in the airplane. We scanned from a closer quarter position. So the handgun was closer to our body. It gave our arms a little bit of a rest, and we could defend it from this position a little easier than we could from an extended position. Now, if you think about it, in an airplane, you're almost always within one step arms reach or even seated arm's reach. So we almost never extended the handgun unless we were in a full shooting position at a threat that was more than that distance away. Now, so, well, what do? Well, we take the gun, we bring it back to what I call a high ready position or close quarter position. Now, in terms of my position, you're going to see me take my hands, retract it all the way back. My forearms are actually touching my chest, okay? I'm not doing the forearm touch on purpose, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compress the handgun as far as I possibly can to get it as far away from the thread as I possibly can. But notice how the angle of the gun and the indexing of the slide is still a position where if I pull the trigger, I'm still going to get good hits. And I can literally index, if you see that little Roman guy over there, and shoot. I can index. I can point the gun anywhere I need to. Now, you may say, well, Mike, why is the gun slightly canted? Because if I try to hold the gun straight up and down, I break my grip apart and this hurts my wrist. So I want to keep my full grip formed and I want to be able to retract my handgun. So for me, with my wrist size and my wrist tightness, that causes the gun to cant over slightly, which is perfectly fine. That's okay. Once again, the important points of the high ready position are the muzzle is horizontal to the ground. So I can pull the trigger right now if I needed to, right? Okay. Muzzle's horizontal to the ground. Notice in terms of this position, body position as well is important. I am not taking the handgun, retracting it, and leaning away from the threat. This is a bad posture, a bad position. Anytime we're shooting, we should have a forward and aggressive posture, right? And we're talking about close quarter shooting positions. You know, these are close quarter fighting positions, right? Think about that. So if we're fighting, we want to have our body weight and posture aggressive and forward at all times, okay? So that's the high ready position. That's the position I would utilize if I'm within that one step arm reach position where he can take one step and he can reach out there and grab that handgun, right? By the way, folks, this is kind of an interesting set of tools. I have this is a SIRT pistol made by Next Level Training, right? You can see it's nearly the same size as this shield. It's designed and it will typically fit in most shield holsters. So I could be training my close quarter positions with this micro SIRT or mini SIRT pistol, and I could have a Coolfire converted M&P, maybe if that's your carry gun, and I could be pulling the trigger and making sure when I'm in this position, the slide will still cycle, right? And that's a Coolfire training conversion kit, by the way. All right, so far, let's see if I have any questions. I don't see a lot of questions coming up. Hopefully you're watching this. We have about 75 live viewers. I love that. For those of you that shared, thank you so much for sharing. If you haven't shared it, grab a share because we're going to be talking about the high ready position and transitioning to the next position, right? So in terms of this next position, you got to understand a few things that I'm going to show you in your hand. And I'm going to show you exactly how to build this position in a safe manner to go from this position to a closer quarter position and how I might practice that with the use of a bob. By the way, the bob made by Century, this is the Bob XL. So the Bob XL actually has a full lower torso base. It doesn't have legs, but it has, you know, a waist area and below. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera. And the good thing about that is you can actually practice and index those positions, right? One of the reasons I utilize either a SIRT pistol at times or I will put the laser extension on my Coolfire trainer is so when I practice these positions, I know exactly where the shots are going. So if I'm shooting from the high ready position and I pull the trigger, I can get a visual index of the laser itself. If I retract and build the closer quarter position, right, I can also pull the trigger and see where those lasers are going. You can barely see it on the camera. It's just exactly where I want to, just below that guy's waistline, okay? So be aware, that's why I do that, okay? 83 people on. I love that. Good morning, Pat. How are you? Joey Russo, 175, man. Damn, Jay. Joey Russo just outcoined you. He threw a 175 number coin up there. So, okay. So let's talk about the position that I want to help you build next. So first of all, let's practice that high ready position. And by the way, when I'm on the range, the way I have students work and build these close quarter positions is a very crawl, walk, run approach. I'm going to give you the cautionary safety rule right now. If you are doing close quarter shooting positions or any position where you're not aiming the handgun and using sighted fire to fire the handgun, you're doing something non-standard, you should have an instructor there with you or have had instructions from a good instructor. Make sure you comply with the safety rules and be super, super careful. So if I'm practicing this with students on the range to work on the close quarter position, I will have them extend the handgun and I will actually put them about 2 yards from the target. I want to put them within this 1-step reach distance. So I will put them about 2 yards from the target. I will have them extend the handgun. I will remind them at this distance, this is not appropriate. This is too close to extend your handgun. So the brain starts to hardwire that distance in. Then I'll say, build the high ready position. Look down, check your muzzle. Is it horizontal to the ground? And is your gun in a position where when you pull the trigger, the slide will not cycle and hit you in the chest? If it's not, fire a shot. Boom. And they fire a shot. And what you will realize if you haven't done this live fire is because the gun is closer to your face, you're going to get some overpressure from the firearm itself. It's not going to hurt you. But what we do need to do is we need to maintain that locked position with our grip. If we grab the handgun and let the wrists and hands relax, when we fire, the gun is going to flip up like this. Every time it recoils, it's going to flip all the way up in the air. That's not a safe position. So when I build the high ready, I've got to maintain the same grip pressure that I normally would shoot from and pull the trigger by gripping the gun hard. As you know, I've been teaching grip for years now. You probably watched some of my videos. When we shoot a handgun, we always have to create the grip pressure to stabilize and fire the shots. Okay? So if you're working on that, extend the handgun, build the high ready, check your position, fire a shot. And when I have them fire one shot, typically I will have them look at the target. And if I were looking for hits, I'm looking for hits somewhere center line of the body, right? And it's going to depend on the height of your target, like how high you have it hung on the backstop or backer, and how tall you are. The taller I am in relation to the target, the higher the hits are going to go. So please don't get in the habit of moving your wrists around and trying to aim the handgun. Use one position and use your body to orient and index the handgun. That way, once I build this position, I know exactly where the handgun's pointed, and I'm not doing this kind of stuff and loosening your wrist up, because that in itself is a violation of that gripping mechanical process we talked about. Okay, let's see if I have any questions here. Good morning, Alan Kelly. God, man. All right, same comments. All right, if you have a question, you can throw it up there. I will address your question. I'm going to fill up my Coolfire trainer, a little bit more gas, because now we're going to talk about transitioning from the close quarter position, aka the high ready, to the extreme close quarter position, ECQC, right? Extreme close quarters something, P. I'm not sure. I got my acronym wrong. Who knows? So the point here is, good question. Joey just asked a great question, by the way. Dan said, so many people using proper grip. I completely agree. I see it all the time. That's why I typically remind them. So Joey Russo asked a fantastic question. I see a lot of guns out there, a lot of folks that are carrying these little cool carry guns, you know, they have an awesome optic on them or whatever else, and they have a ported barrel. And I remember there was a major police agency pretty close to me that used to run ported barrels on their Glocks. But what they found was when the guns were compressed into the high ready position, or even more importantly, in the closer quarter position, the extreme close quarter position where you're literally indexing the gun off of your body, those ports in the barrel or that compensator, and they basically do the same thing, we're venting the gas and small fragments of jacket or lead into their face. So those ported guns and those comp guns are not good for closer quarter shooting positions. They're great at distance when you're firing quick shots. They absolutely have an effect on how much the muzzle moves. But if you think you're going to be in a situation where you're in the fouled up tangle and you're fighting over your handgun, I would not suggest a ported firearm. So that's a good point for you. So there's your tip. Be very, very cautious, or at a minimum, test your ported or your comp firearms in close quarter shooting position. I'm not a fan of having ports on a handgun for that circumstance, okay? So Al, we'll talk about out of the holster here in a second, because that's a very much misinformed subject, I believe, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. So is it Francois? Francois? I'm not. Swanepoel. That's a unique name. I'm sorry. If I'm messing up your name, I call you Frank. Maybe that's not proper either. I'm sorry. So the question was, does your firing position change in close quarter when one hand is injured or not available? Of course. So if this hand is injured, right, I'm going to do this, right? And I'm going to be doing the exact opposite. So when I practice my close quarter shooting position, a lot of times you can see some marks on Bob. I'll practice striking and shooting. And you may say, well, Mike, why would you ever present your handgun like that and strike with it? Because I'm talking about a circumstance where at that moment in time, I can't shoot or choose not to shoot. Maybe there's a family member behind the threat, or maybe the gun doesn't work. And one of the things that you'll find in terms of striking is when someone is reaching and grabbing, and I'll do this with a SIRT pistol so I can be a little more liberal of my hands. When someone is reaching up and grabbing for the handgun, if we end up in a tug of war, they're tugging back, and it's a very mutual thing. And a lot of times they can actually wrench the gun out of your hand. But when they grab the handgun and you shove it aggressively forward, oftentimes that breaks the grip. You know, basically they're trying to grab like this, and you're presenting the handgun directly to their chest. And for me, when I work on it, I work on using my whole body to drive that handgun straight forward and high into this sternum notch or throat area. So I'm taking their hands and I'm driving their hands here and trying to make contact. And oftentimes I'll practice that strike in an offline movement, boom, and I'll shoot from there. So I'm practicing striking, moving offline, and actually pulling the trigger. So I'm striking, boom, building that close quarter position, and then firing those shots from there. So that's typically what I'll do. But your question about the other hand is, you know, sometimes I'll switch to the other hand and I'll practice striking with the other hand. So I can build these shooting positions with my left hand or my right hand, okay? And that's important to understand. You should be able to do most of these things with both hands, but I'm not advocating if you don't need to doing a lot of hand switching, right? I know there might be a case in close quarter protective work if I have to control my subject for whatever reason. I may consider switching hands so I can control the person I'm trying to protect, but I think that would be the only situation I've heard where that's a liable, or a viable is the word I'm trying to use, a viable thing to do without having an injury. But if I'm injured, right, I'm going to put the gun in the other hand if I need to do that, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about the transition to the even closer quarter position. So, and by the way, let's talk about this. Let's see what kind of questions. We have some great questions. We're going to talk about the draw from the holster in a second, Al. So Dan asks, is there a chance of striking with your firearm while causing a jam to misfire? It's a great question. So I'll answer your question in terms of striking. So the question is from Dan, will striking with your firearm cause a jam? And I wrote an article many years ago for PDN. It's still out there. It's still on my blog as well. And it was a close quarter shooting position article. And my thought was, if I extend the handgun and do a strike with it, it will push the slide out of battery, and the gun will malfunction or misfire or whatever else. So I actually had a board, a 2x4 that I used, and I had a bob as well that I've tried this on. And I've done this probably hundreds of times at this point in time, where with a loaded firearm, I take the gun and I strike as hard as I can, and I fire the shots afterwards, right? So I strike, move, and shoot. Not one single time, Dan, not one single time has the firearm malfunctioned and failed to fire, because the recoil spring is designed to do that. So the second we push the gun out of battery, oftentimes it will go back into battery. Now, am I saying that it would never happen, that you might never cause a malfunction? No, I'm not saying that. And in that case, I'm not as worried about that, because if I'm striking for a reason where shooting at that moment in time is not my desired action, if that makes sense. It's not my desired action, maybe because I already have a malfunction. It's not my desired action because I've got a family member back here behind the threat, but it's not my desired action. So I'm not as concerned with the malfunction, but I will tell you, I could not get my handgun to malfunction when I tested that live fire, and I've done it over and over again with both a bob and striking a wooden 2x4, and it didn't actually didn't fail, believe it or not. Okay, in terms of Alice, so Al Reed asked about how about out of the holster close quarter defense. So here's the deal: if you are holstered up, if the handgun is in your holster and you're close enough to touch someone or reach someone, or they're close enough to touch you, that is not the time to draw the handgun unless you've transitioned to some semblance of control that I can't necessarily show you effectively on this live stream. I'll have to get an actual human in here, where we've, in terms of, like, for example, what South Narc teaches in this class, Craig Douglas and some of these guys teach this class, Cecil Birch, they're going to get what they call same side access control. So they're going to take this arm, they're going to drag it, they're going to pin it, they're going to push it against the body, and they're going to control the same arm that is on the side of the body where I'm drawing my handgun from. And only in that case, once they've secured this person so they can't grab your handgun, will they draw the gun. So if your gun is in your holster and you're close enough to touch someone, leave the gun in your holster, fight your way out of it until you can draw the handgun and utilize it. So one of the biggest mistakes we see in some of these close quarter, simulations is, people that are trying to draw the handgun while they're in contact physically with another person that doesn't want them to draw the handgun and shoot them, and it fails almost every single time. So I am not a proponent of thinking that you can strike and draw real quick or whatever else. Try it if you want to against a motivated opponent. More often than not, you're going to get fouled, meaning they're going to get their hand on the handgun. They're going to stop your draw process. They're going to get your handgun from you, or at a minimum, they're going to make it much more hard or much more difficult for you to fire good shots, if that makes sense. Okay. Jay asked, what if you forgot to chamber and then your one hand is in the bad guy trying to get your gun? How can we rack the gun? Well, Jace, if you forgot to chamber, that's an issue in the first place, right? So I would address that first. I don't know why you would forget to chamber around if you're doing a process load, proper load process. But in everything that I do, I'm always talking about the ability to one-hand manipulate. So with all the guns that I carry, whether they have an optic on them or they're an iron-sighted handgun, I have the ability to manipulate the slide with one hand off my body. That's one of my requirements for defensive handgun. I talk about it in my defensive handgun book. Read the book. If you don't have the book, get the book. It's a pretty good book. But yes, we want to be able to manipulate with one hand if you have anything. Okay. Tony, that's a great question. If you have control of the attacker's arms, are you still facing a deadly threat? And I can't answer that. That's something you have to answer yourself. And I will tell you that in terms of controlling their arm and drawing a handgun, we're talking about a circumstance where they've already presented facts that allow you to be able to articulate they're trying to kill you with their weapon of whatever sort, or they're trying to take your gun and kill you with the gun. We all know what happens when people lose their firearms. It's been documented for many, many years. But does me having a temporary arm drag and control position make it difficult for me to fire a shot because now I'm somewhat in control of a person? And only you can answer that question. It depends on their size, their strength, the disparity of force, and everything else. If you are truly in control and you're no longer in fear of grave bodily injury or your life, well, then I would tell you not to pull the trigger. But the way that most of these positions are taught is this is a full contact, high threat fight where you transition to a position where you, from a moment in time, you can take shots. For a moment in time, you're going to take those shots if you can still articulate that this guy's still trying to kill you or will kill you if he breaks out of that position. So I think that's how the position itself is. But I agree. You got to think about those things and you got to address those things as well. Okay. Pablo asked about the car system. We're talking about the center access relock. I think it's if you're using a high ready position, this is my position. I don't know the details or the tenets of the car system, but I think that I don't know. I don't know about that much about that system. I'm not going to address that right now. Good morning. All right, so let's see what else I have here. So Brian Schuler, any advice for a 60-year-old who's not a combat grappler that I used to be? Hey, well, so here's Brian Schuler's question. That's a fantastic question. Because the stuff that I'm talking about, so let me answer the question like this. Every one of us is different in size and strength and ability, right? Your decision to tie up with someone may be based on your size and strength and ability, right? I might choose to wait a little longer to draw my handgun or utilize my handgun if I felt competent to put my hands on someone and control them. Someone that is not of the same size and ability or youth, someone that's a little younger, maybe someone that's a little older, for example, you may choose to fire here before the person ever gets closer than they need to. I might have to wait a little longer and be able to articulate. I did not fear grave bodily injury or for my life at that point in time. But the second you do what you have to do. So I would also tell you, Brian, you do what you can do. I know that. You say 68-year-old, you do what you can do. I think these principles are still the same. I think you should stay as strong as you possibly can. I think you should stay as flexible as you possibly can. And I say that you continue to train proper techniques so you can utilize these skills to your ability if the need arises. And whatever your ability is. I can't necessarily answer that for anybody because that changes based on the human and your facts and your circumstances. For example, years ago, believe it or not, for those of you who don't know this, I had 2 hip replacements. I have both of my hips. They're replaced. Right. So at that point in time, I was on crutches. I would have defensively used my handgun probably different than I would today, where I could get close to someone and be pretty confident in my ability to manage that close in fight for a moment or two in time, if that makes sense. Okay. Connor, we're talking about, if you're asking about this pistola, we're talking about the Coolfire trainer. Okay. Dan says distance is your friend. I completely agree with it. 100%. Okay. Okay, so let's talk real quickly about let's talk. And by the way, I see Chris Berry from Parish Florida. Good morning. How are you, sir? So let's talk about transitioning. We talked about the utility of the close quarter position when I am within 1 step arm's reach away from Bob. What happens though when I'm even closer, where Bob can reach my gun without taking a step or doing anything else, meaning my gun is in this position for him or her to grab. And I need to transition at this point in time to another position, and I'm going to give you a trick that you will probably not believe will be effective until you try it, but it's highly effective. So let's talk about the transition first. Anytime I'm transitioning, and here's your close quarter shooting tip of the day, from this position, the close quarter position, to an extreme close quarter, meaning I'm in physical contact with the person, I'm going to transition by rolling my hand up the side of the gun and never in front of the muzzle. So once again, watch the transition. I'm rolling the hand up the side of the gun as I retract the firearm. Now, what is this hand doing? Well, this hand could strike and maybe try to get inside the eyes, right? This hand can stiff arm, right? And you'd be surprised at how effective stiff arming is for a few moments in keeping someone off you and protecting your firearm. But this hand is in a position where it's doing something else. I'm trying to keep the person off of my body. I will tell you, for those of you that are wondering, well, Mike, why wouldn't you always strike? Or could you punch? Yes, you could do all those things. But what we see sometimes is if this guy is sweaty or greasy, and we take that hand and we rotate off of the gun and we try to throw that perfect strike and we slide to this position instead. Now he is inside my arms. I don't want this. I don't want this position at all, right? So be kind of careful of thinking that throwing a strike out there is just going to knock him down or knock him out. It's probably not the case. Now, I'm not saying I would pop in quickly and move to a different position, but what I found is my hand will stay on the body and off balance bob or keep the person off me longer with this kind of stiff arming. Now, for me, I'm going to have the hand up so I can protect my head or my face a little bit as much as possible. And if you're observing right now, my firearm is in a very unique position. If you notice, my trigger finger is at the same angle as my barrel. I'm showing you that so against my black shirt, you can see the angle of the firearm, because a lot of folks see this online or on the interwebs, and they say, well, Mike, why are you shooting at a downward angle, right? Isn't the high center chest the priority target if you're engaging someone? Certainly it is. I'll switch to the SIRT pistol so you get a visual of the laser. Certainly, you know, in my police academy days, they taught us the rock and lock, where we rocked the gun back out of the holster and fired shots. And maybe the theory was you're getting pummeled up next to your car, you defend the guy, or you keep the guy off you long enough where you can take your handgun out of your holster, you can rock it out of the holster, boom, and fire shots to center mass. As much as maybe people have pulled that off, I don't think that's a viable technique in most cases. In a good retention holster, I would suggest you consider leaving the gun in the holster and fighting to a better position before you draw the handgun. Now, I'm not saying it's never a circumstance, or there's never a circumstance where rocking the gun out of the holster might be smart, but I'm telling you that once the gun comes out of the holster, now it's fair play for everybody, right? Now, the second thing that I'm doing here, the reason I don't have the gun up at this position is my hand is out here in this area. So I don't want to point the gun in that area. If my hand is striking or stiff arming, I want the gun in a position. Let me move Bob a little more for you. I want the gun in a position where I'm shooting lower in target. So I'm shooting for this pelvis groin area. I could be striking and defending and shooting the entire time and not have to worry about pointing the gun in my hand. So if you notice, this gun is angled down and targeting the lower body, right? I'm trying to take the mobility away, maybe making them fall down. I'm not trying to orient the handgun up here, because my hand and my arm, or the handgun and my arm, are too close. I don't want to shoot myself in the hand. So when you're building this situation, or building the circumstance, or the shooting position, I should say, when you're building the shooting position, consider, once again, rotating your hand off of the handgun into a position where you can strike or stiff arm, and then you can fire. Now, one more thing about this I want to cover and make sure you understand. My thumb has to be in the proper position. So with this higher index point, my thumb is creating the mechanical distance between the slide and my body. So when I fire the shots, let me show you with the Coolfire, the slide cycle, right? If my thumb was pinning the slide, right, I may cause a malfunction. So the thumb has to be in a position where it's creating space between the gun and my body. But I'm not doing this, because this is very easy to grab. That's much easier to grab out of my hand. I am taking the handgun, I'm retracting it as far physically as I can, physically, and I'm pushing the gun up against my body, right? When you do this, you're going to get a big cramp in your rear delt and your trap if you're doing it right. A lot of times I'll walk up and down the line with students in classes and I'll move their gun farther to the rear because their guns are up here. This gun, now I keep switching back and forth. Even though this is a completely safe converted Coolfire trainer, it can't be fired. It's got a Coolfire barrel. I still don't like putting my hand in front of that barrel. That's just a training instinct. I don't mind doing this though, because this is an obvious demonstration tool. We call that, by the way, for you instructors, a SIRT demonstration tool, not a SIRT pistol, because that way we don't call it a gun. Theoretically, that's a good instructor tip. Anyways, the point is, when the gun is way out here, it is way easier to wrench away from someone than back here. It's harder to grab back there. It's much more defendable. And you'd be surprised at how effectively you can defend by stiff arming. Now, one of the things I want you to remember, and I know I'm getting into some details because there's so many details here. Hope you enjoy this. Is my feet are somewhat square. So my feet are like this and very strong, and my pelvis is square, my chest is square. And my whole body weight is upward and forward. I don't want to blade off. I don't like to blade off too much, because if I'm blading off too much to try to protect the gun and the person gets to my backside like this, that's that. So if I'm blading off too much and somehow he pulls my arm and gets to this position, he is starting to get to my back, and I don't want that. I certainly don't want someone to get to my back, if that makes sense. Okay. Sorry, folks. I gotta send a text. Okay, so let's see what we got here. 79 live viewers on. Not huge numbers today. Maybe this is a subject most people don't want to cover, but hey, it's something you need to learn. So I'm glad that those of you are on. Okay, Jose, yes, brother. Thank you for bringing that up. This becomes a critical issue for those of you that are manual safety 1911 carriers, or even maybe manual safety. For example, the old M&P Shield, that's got a teeny tiny thumb safety. I would not recommend that one. But the new version of the Shield has a pretty good thumb safety. There's, the 320 variants, a lot of polymer pistol variants out there with a thumb safety, a manual thumb safety you can wipe on and off, which I like. I support that. I think it's a great tool. But if I'm working, from this position, anytime for me when I extend my handgun with my 1911, the safety comes off. Because if I'm going to an aim position, I assume there's a possibility I'm probably going to fire it. Now, I can go to an aim position and then decide not to fire it, right? That's a possibility. But when I'm doing this, right, and I come back to my high ready position, I am actually wiping the safety back on. So I might be searching from a position where my safety is on in this place. So if I'm going to practice shooting with my 1911, I need to practice wiping the safety off, boom, 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 and firing. Safety back on, right? Boom, boom, boom. Does that make sense? So make sure you're managing your safety properly. If I wanted to transition to a close quarter position with my 1911, I'm going to practice rotating the hand off. The safety comes off. So let me show you that with a camera view. Once again, one more time. Listen to the manual safety. Rotating the hand off. Building the position. Safety comes off. Boom. Fire from here. Boom, boom, boom. Strike, defend, stiff arm, whatever else. One more thing about this position. When I get the hand back on the handgun, I'm going to come back to my chest and go under the handgun. I'm not going to take the hand and try to push it back in the gun and go in front of the muzzle, right? So once again, right, from this position, the safety is probably on, unless I was already shooting from this position, in the case the safety might be off, right? So I'm going to rotate the hand off of the gun, right? Build the position, wipe the safety off, boom, fire my shots. When I'm done firing my shots and get my distance, hand comes back to my chest, under the gun. That's the safest way for you to get the other hand back on the handgun. So consider that, that kind of under the handgun. Man, I saw a couple of videos today. Be really careful. I saw a video on social media where guys are drawing and they're doing something. They're coming out and they're going, boom, 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 boom. They're doing all this transition when you're shooting to extent. man, there's a lot of transitioning there. Well, I don't like the hands untied and a lot of boom, 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 hoping my hand doesn't get in the way. So for me, if you are at an appropriate distance, I may extend the handgun. If you get too close, I may bring the handgun back here. If I were shooting from here, boom, 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 I may shoot to retraction. Boom, 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 boom. When I transition to the other position, though, there's going to be a slight pause in the shooting. Boom, boom. You're still coming. The rounds haven't had effect. I'm going to stop the shooting. Boom, transition to the point where I'm going to try to stop you from grabbing my gun or making contact, and then I will start shooting again. So there's a slight pause in that position itself, if that makes any sense. Okay. Yeah. Pat, I completely agree with that 100%. Oh, John says that the rhomboid is John correct in my muscular anatomy discussion? You're probably right, John. You're right. And hello, Earl. How are you? Yes. Eric Mejia is recommending Deadly's Force, understanding your right to self-defense completely. I recommend anything that Masad Ayub writes. He's a fantastic author and a great guy. Hello, Matt Sims. How are you, sir? Yeah, that's right. Ronald, good. All right, folks. I don't see any other questions right now. Oh, I do actually. Dan Schreiner made a great point. A secondary weapon like a knife is good for close quarter, right? Boom, have the edge weapon. One of the things that a lot of the guys that are doing all the gun grappling stuff, a lot of them are carrying fixed blades. They're carrying fixed blades or automatic openers on the offside. So if someone gets their hand on the handgun, they're fighting, they're in that fouled up tangle, they can access that knife, whether it's a fixed blade or an automatic opener, and start to stick or slice or dice with the opposite side. So I certainly think a knife or an edge weapon is a secondary tool that someone should consider having and training with and or on a regular basis. I completely agree with that. Okay. All right. So if you have any questions, please let me know and we'll discuss those. And I'm going to end this in a second. I got to get outside and do a little bit of workout. So good question. So John, man, that's a great question. So John is asking, moving in structures, single story, or how I might move in a structure. And I'll give you an example. If I'm searching my house, I'm going through the house for whatever reason, I am almost always going to be searching if it's a lit condition, meaning I don't need a flashlight in my hand, in the high ready position. So I'll be moving along and I'm searching. I'm at this high ready position, right? Boom, that I could turn and I could shoot from right away, right? I could also retract the handgun and protect it, right? And I can also say, hey, you get down, or boom, 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 fire my shots, if that makes any sense. So I'm shooting from that close quarter position. Now, when I go through certain areas, let's say, for example, I'm going to go through this door area. Let me reverse it so you can see it better on the camera. If I were coming from this area in here, and this is a very close space and maybe an unknown, I might transition from this position, right, to this position, where I'm coming in with my hand and my arm up, right? The reason I do that is if you swung a bat or a knife or a fist at me, my arm is up in the way, but it's not blocking my vision, but I can protect the gun for a moment in time. And once I come through this doorway, I'm coming through here, I transition, okay, nobody's there, I may come right back to my high ready position and continue to move. Now, if I'm searching with a flashlight, then I'm almost always going to be searching from a pretty compressed position where I could build the shooting position, or I can retract the gun, I can strike, and I can do everything else. Of course, we talk about that in my, as you know, John, my low light fight section of the Coin members area. We talk about striking and defending. I won't go too deep into the flashlight stuff because that was a different live stream I recently did. So that's typically the positions I will move through or from. Okay. Soul, Matt Sims. Well, that's a good question. So I don't want to poo-poo on Soul. I think Soul is only a position to move around someone that you decide you don't want to muzzle. So if you are the person, the camera is the person, I might go to a Soul to get around you. That's the only time I'm going to use it. This is not a good search position. It's not a good movement position unless there's someone I don't want to point the gun at. So if maybe Bob and I are getting ready to go in a room, I might go to a sole position to keep the muzzle from pointing at Bob, right? Or maybe even a high ready type position. I'm not opposed to either of those, but I'll tell you the sole position and the high ready type positions make it very easy for someone to compress your gun against your body and take your gun away. So I don't think they're viable singleton search positions for any reason other than going, okay, I don't want to point my gun at you. I'm going to go to the sole, and then I'm going to go right back to the high ready position that I can shoot from, I can extend from, or I can protect and shoot from, if that makes sense. Okay. Same thing with the high ready. I'm not a big fan of the high ready. Eat the gun. I don't want to eat the gun. But I may very well have to be in a position where I'm like, okay, let's go, man. You know, get the gun out of the person's way. The gun's up here, so I can very, very quickly index as we come in, you know, and do stuff like that. And I don't teach CQB. I don't really do CQB. I just think about gun positions in terms of shooting fast and fighting and defending the handgun, if that makes sense. In a vehicle, the high ready might be a viable position too. I know you didn't ask that, but I answered it as well. So, Kimori Kiyawajuma, that is an awesome name. I love that. Always carrying a flashlight all day, every day. That's the Surefire Stiletto, by the way. I love this light. I need to recharge it, but I use it all of the time, right? And I use it, strike with it. It's tough. I've washed it, yes, all day, every day, and I probably have a second light near me as well. So Alan, from high ready position, do you, if space is available, do pie? Yes, 100%. So Alan Kelly, if I were to, let's say I'm going to work this corner, right? I would 100% keep as much distance as I can, so I'm outside of that one step reach distance that we talked about earlier. And from here, I would absolutely be taking my vision. Let me use the laser for you. You'll see this. You can all see the laser, right? So I'm taking my vision. My vision is doing this. I'm looking up. I'm looking for a foot, looking up. I'm searching. I'm slicing the pie. I would keep as much distance as possible on that entire corner, and I would try to see what's in there. And I might do the opposite direction as well before I ever entered that position. So I 100% would slice that pie and stay out of that doorway unless the circumstances warranted me going more aggressive. Meaning now there's a bump in the night, there's someone downstairs, I need to get to the doorway and get to my kid's bedroom. You know, I'm coming hard, probably fast, and then, you know, digging left or digging right, if that makes sense, Alan. Good question. Do you miss the grip safety? William asked, do I miss? I'm not sure, William, if you're asking if I miss it, like I'm emotional about not having it, but I still carry a 1911, or miss it like I don't wipe it off. No. And the reason for that is I don't have a carry gun, but you can see these safeties, of course, both Wilson Combat, they're pretty big and robust, but they're not so big and robust that they get in the way of my body when I'm carrying the gun, right? One more thing about this, there's kind of a definitive manual feel to this, so the safety doesn't get bumped and knocked off. I do on a regular basis in my carry gun, I'll reach down and make sure the safety is up. You know, we just moved, for example, and I carried a bunch of heavy boxes and carried things on a regular basis. There's a possibility you might get that manual safety knocked off. I don't ever want it off in my holster, but I don't miss it. It's a definitive on and off safety. Full disclosure for the 50 people or whatever that's still on, I shoot 1911 all the time, like hundreds of thousands of rounds. So I'm not worried about the manual safety or not wiping it off or whatever else. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. So trigger resetting dry fire mags. Connor, I'm sorry I can't answer your question because I'm not familiar with those. I'm a huge fan of, if you want to work on, you know, shooting multiple shots, the Coolfire, because then I can truly work on resetting the trigger properly. Where's my gas, right? By the way, the smaller, shorter barrels have a few less shots in the Coolfire. The bigger barrels, like if I have my Glock 17, or my Berettas, I can get 30 or so shots on a lot of those. But, you know, in terms of resetting the trigger, I can work on resetting prepping, right, at speed, or just accelerating through, or pressing real slow, reset fast. By the way, that's the right way to pull the trigger. We can talk about that in a future live stream. So I'm a fan of those. I don't have the resetting trigger dry fire mag. So, Jared, good question. I almost never wear gloves, so I don't do it. I will go through a few reps, like if I travel to Wyoming and I'm carrying, but oftentimes if I'm up in the mountains, I'm actually probably carrying an outside the waistband holster at strong side with a Glock. You know, I know I saw your post about a 10 millimeter. I'm going to carry probably a 40 or 45, you know, Glock variant that doesn't have a manual safety. And the reason I don't care about that is because I'm carrying in an outside the waistband holster like an ALS or something like that, if that makes sense. Okay. And Eric, I look forward to seeing you, man. That's going to be a great class. I think you're in the third day. You're not in the first 2-day one. Let me know if you want to drop me a text or something. So, all right. All right, folks. So I don't have a lot more time here. Just to summarize, let me get Bob here. By the way, can y'all give Bob a round of applause? Good job, Bob. Hey, Bob, you did a great job. Anyways, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the distance management, learning, and you can do this with a partner with a SIRT pistol or a plastic gun. Learning where it's appropriate to extend the handgun, and where it's not appropriate, where we need to compress the handgun to what I call a close quarter position, the high ready, which is also my search position, or even an extremely close quarter position. Now, don't forget, the summary on the close quarter position: retract the handgun, muzzle stays horizontal to the ground, maintain a full grip position, use your body to index and point the gun, aggressive and forward, not back on your heels. Transitioning to an extreme close quarter position, I may transition by rotating the hand off of the handgun and retracting the gun as far as I possibly can while I strike or eye gouge or stiff arm or do whatever else I need to do. The thumb needs to create some mechanical offset so the slide can travel. I'm going to retract the gun as far as I physically can, and I'm going to push the gun up against my body, and I'm going to keep my body weight and posture aggressive and forward. So when I fire shots, let me back Bob up a little more. Okay, I can actually practice getting the hits I want to. They're down center line of the body, pelvic area, hopefully in the groin and stuff like that. Last but not least, pay attention to the angle of the firearm in the gun position. The reason the gun is oriented down is because my hand is up here defending, striking, stiff arming, doing whatever it's doing, and I don't want to point my gun at my own hand and shoot myself in the arm or my hand. So that's why I'm doing that. Once again, the rotation of the hand is pretty simple. When I rotate my hand off the gun to the other position, it's coming up the side of the handgun, not in front of the muzzle, strike, do whatever else. To get the hand back on the handgun after shots are fired, or if you have the distance, bring the hand back to your body, slide it under the trigger guard, rebuild your grip. So there's your safety lecture in terms of getting the hand back on the handgun. I do want to remind you, we talked about it very, very quickly on drawing too soon. Be careful. You need to watch that video again, rewind it if you're catching this later on YouTube or whatever else. Don't draw the handgun if it's secure in your holster. Use your hands and knees and elbows to strike or run or go to a better position until it's an appropriate time to draw the handgun. Okay? Let me clean up the last couple questions. We'll go from there. So Dan asked about the Coolfire. Dan, I have only used, these are the Tipman like paintball canisters. This is the new device they gave me a while ago. It's actually been quite a while. I need to meet with these guys and get some more gear. But this allows me to turn the valve on and off. So the Tipman is my refill option. I keep it upside down and refill the gun like that, if that makes sense. They have some other refill options. I have used the little mini canisters, by the way. They actually work really good. They last a long time. I've traveled with those a couple times. So they're pretty impressive as well. Dean asked about thoughts on striking Bob in the eyes, support arm, elbow, striking sternum, while clearing for AWB. Support arm is frame header, Bob off pelvic, blah, blah, blah. So, Dean, that's a fantastic question. So here's the deal, Dee. So when I'm working my firearm combatives, I'll work from this position, right? Well, strike and I'll shoot. We talked about that earlier if you didn't watch it. Then I'll work some of the position where I'll strike and I'll shoot, right? And then I'll retract and I'll shoot. Now, when I'm striking, I'm going to do two things. Sometimes I practice the stiff arm. This tends to put the person off balance, this stiff arming, and you'd be surprised at how long you can keep them off your gun. But I also do strike in the eyes, right? I really want to get my hand or my palm. I tuck the thumb so I don't break my thumb off, right? I really want to get my palm of my hand under the chin, and then I want to put the fingers in the eyes. So I am absolutely eye gouging and figuring this out. Could you do throat strikes? Yes, you could. But I found if I can get to this position where I'm trying to feel his brain with my fingers, I want to do that. Now, your other question was, could you cover your head up, and go to an elbow position where you're literally striking and then getting, yes, you could. Would I go to that position and draw the handgun? I think in theory that sounds cool, but with a real human with two arms that they're punching me with and grabbing me with, it's not as clean as you would think to come into this position and do it, a sternum type hit on this person and then draw. Am I saying you couldn't do it? No, I'm saying I would rather fight to a better position than that. It just doesn't play out very well. But the things that we've talked about today, keep in mind, are the gun is already out. You're already searching. So may I go from a position where he got past my arm and he's getting close, or maybe he's punching me in the head, and I drive the elbow in as hard as I can, cover my head, and continue to shoot? Yes, I use this technique a lot, right? Just like I use this technique a lot, right? So I'm keeping that arm on his throat. I know I'm going into the details he didn't ask, but that's the position. Now, I can work the knees, I can work all kinds of stuff from there. So there's a lot of things you can do with these bobs, by the way. A lot of times that the cardio and the tail end of my workout is just some working on bob and some moving offline or whatever else. Okay. William, thank you very much for watching that. Okay. Jose, thank you I appreciate that. So anyways, Dean, I hope that answer your question. And Dan, you're welcome. Okay. All right, folks. I don't see anything else in terms of questions. I appreciate you all coming on. This is great material. I think it's super important. It's something that people don't really think through and logically break down. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that if people geared up with the training tool and tried a lot of the stuff they talk about doing or teach, they would find it fails and it breaks down pretty quickly. So, which is why you got to kind of pressure test things, and it's not fun. It's not necessarily hard. So, and I see your comment, Jay. You're welcome very much. And Connor, great. I'm glad you did that. Get up. If you don't have a Bob, folks, they're an invaluable training tool. Get the Bob XL from Century Martial Arts. If you go to my podcast page, we have a discount code. I hope it's still active. If you work at Century, if you know somebody at Century, tell them to reach out to us. We haven't heard from them for a while, so their sponsorship is lagging just a little bit. And I really tried to promote their tools because I think it's fantastic, by the way. You're welcome, James and Tony and everybody else, okay? All right, folks, that's all I have. Hey, have a great day. Have a safe one. Great weekend as well. Members Q&A tomorrow night. For those of you that are coin members or members of any kind, get on the Q&A tomorrow night. Don't forget, on the Q&A, I can see you as well as me. It's not the same as the Facebook live stream. So if you're a member, I'll see you tomorrow night, 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Thursday evenings. Log into the vault and go from there. So, and nice to see you guys, Dan and Joey, Alan, Mr. James. Good. Thank you. Have a nice night. Until then, train hard.